So you're all very welcome to the episode of Organic Matters this week, the podcast brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. And a lot of you out there will know that it is clover sowing season. And of course, white clover, red clover, very, very important on organic farms. But Kevin O Hanlon is joining me, a dairy farmer from County Wexford, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, manager on a farm in Wexford, on
Lovely.
a dairy farm in Wexford.
Lovely stuff. And Kevin, you are the poster boy for red clover. I know that's a dream come true for you. I mean, a lot of girls had Leonardo DiCaprio up on their walls, but a lot of farmers have you up there instead when it comes to red clover and white clover instead.
It must be hard to have someone on their wall.
So look, give people the lay of the land. How many acres are you farming and how many cows are you milking and how long left do you have until full organic conversion?
We're milking around 160 to 170 cows. It changes slightly with we do some calf rearing on some cows, older cows and stuff like that. So that can between 160 and 170. We're farming overall cereal crops and grassland, and the milking block. There's around 340 acres, I think, between everything. Then there's a lot of, we do a good bit of sex seamless. There's a lot of heifer calves kept, so there's a lot of females on the ground. Like there's 80 heifer calves this year. We usually sell some of them in calf, so it's there's still a good bit of stock around, even though the acres the acres to the volume of cows milking sounds small, but we're hoping to be pretty much self-sufficient this winter in meal and everything that we grow our own crops. We have lupins and we've lupins, barley, peas, oats mixed together. We've barley and peas gone in. We've oats gone in their own. There's other ones with barley, peas, and oats, and then they're undersold multi-species sward. There's around 25 acres of that gone in. That'll be all whole crop. But yeah, we're hoping to be self-sufficient. That'll be very little nuts bought in for the dairy this winter.
And is it all spring calving, or do you have any winter calving as well?
It's kind of split. I suppose it's gone to nearly 50-50 at this stage. It's more or less, it takes a while to swing it around. We wore spring calving, wore a 10-week block spring calving herd. But there's a good price for the organics over the winter. If we're to grow our own feed, it's a cheaper farm, so we'll be able to produce the milk that bit cheaper is the hope. So it's a calving is split. Our first year is down. We were first year done in conversion next week, I think. We're around the beginning of May. Sure.
You're gonna have a cake for the anniversary.
No.
Well, look, I guess we're talking about we're talking about human food, but we'll talk about animal food for a second. So this whole thing about clover, it's really important in organics because obviously we can't use chemical fertilizer, and clover helps. It's a natural nitrogen fixation tool in the ground, with its rhizomium nodules. Am I thinking of the rhizomes? But also on top of that as well, especially when it comes to red clover, the protein content is incredibly important in the red clover, especially for winter feed, like you were saying, especially to substitute maybe slightly more expensive organic meal that can be in excess of, I don't know, €600 a ton, that kind of thing. But also for, say, winter milks, making sure that the protein levels for the cows is high enough as well. So if we got down to, say, a very basic scenario here where, if you were giving me advice and I am planning on sowing 8 acres of red and white clover for the first time this year in a field that's never been sown or never been ploughed. It's just in grassland at the minute. It's a fairly flat field, fairly well draining. I've done my soil test. I've got my pH levels right. What do I do? When do I start sowing? What do I do, Kevin? Where do I go?
See, I suppose we're slightly different with the red clover side of it. Mm-hmm. We're slightly different because we're in our red clover's in a tillage rotation. Okay. So we sowed in September, but we put in with forage rye. Okay. So the forage rye kind of nurses it over the winter, and then we take out the forage rye coming off in a kind of 2-3 weeks time. We'll be taking that crop off, and then we've red clover sward after that. Now we've no grasses running through it; it's just a stand of red clover. We'll cut that probably. We'll cut it. We cut in 2 weeks' time. Then we cut probably twice more this year. and we will actually graze that over the winter. Now the reason we can graze over the winter is because we only need it for 2 years. If you were looking for a long-term lay, you wouldn't be inclined to graze over the winter because you're trying to mind it a lot more. It'll take punishment for a year or two if you can follow what I mean. It's just if you want it as a longer term lay, you probably actually put some grass seeds in through it as well.
Would you use, because there are different types of red clover as well and different leaf sizes and that kind of thing, would you use a different type of clover, say in a short-term lay like the one you're doing, kind of a 2-year one versus a long-term lay?
No, it's the large leaf clover we use. No, because it's designed to last about 5 years. It's just the fact that we only need it for the 2 because of the rotation, because we're moving crops around. We're in a fertility building stage, and then you're utilizing that fertility with oats and beans, or not with oats and barley after. You're building up your nitrogen reserve, and then the next crop is going to use up that. So you go around the farm that way. So it's with us, the variety wouldn't be the biggest thing with us because we only need it for so short. It's in such a short amount of time.
And say it's quite hard to get the organic seed, or do you have to get a derogation for it, or where do you go to get the seed for the clover?
We got the seed for the clover off of Fruit Hill Farm the last time.
Okay.
I honestly can't remember whether that was organic. We had to get derogation. I think we had to get a derogation for it. Was there's no organic red clover available? There's no problem getting a derogation if there's no red clover available.
I guess so. I've been to a good few farm walks talking about do you oversow or do you plow or that kind of thing, and all of the advice that I've heard in terms of, say, planning for oversowing, what a lot of people say is that if get an early enough cut of silage in May time, because you want to oversow your clover before the summer period in case of drought, because you want to give it enough moisture to kind of establish itself. But you also want to make sure the clover seed manages to touch the ground, which is why you want to do it after silage season. Then spread some very kind of runny slurry, for want of a better phrase, over it, and then make sure it's kept graze tight over the summer period as well, to make sure that the clover gets a chance to establish itself. I guess this is all kind of conventional advice though. So the advice with oversowing that I heard was to mix the fertilizer and the clover seed together in a fertilizer spreader and to spread it out that way if you're oversowing it. I mean, do you have any tips for sowing clover if we can't use a fertilizer spreader?
We've used a disc. We put it out with the disc over. It's a Kuhn 3-meter disc. It's just a tillage disc, normal disc. But we barely have it. It'd be only tingling the ground. It'd be I don't know how it's only barely tingling the ground, and then we have a broadcast seeder on top of that, and that's just broadcasting out the seed over the disc. So it's it's kind of with the field to be grazed very, very tight before we go and do it. And the biggest thing is to graze it fairly often after, because you want to keep light down to the base of that plant, to the base of the grass, that you don't want the grass getting ahead. So it's kind of every 14 days you're going back in grazing that, because kind of the rule of thumb most of the time is it'll grow half the amount of grass in the first 14 days and it'll grow the second half in the next 7 days in a 21-day rotation, we say, in the usual rotation. So you have to keep light down to the base to give the clover a chance to actually get up and go. And the rest of the grass will just smothered out, and it's kind of waste of time.
And do you say, when you go in with the disc, are you talking about going in September time, like you said earlier, or are you talking about going in, say, around May time?
No, this will be on the grassland. This will be going oversown into the cow paddocks or the grazing pasture.
And what would your sowing rate be to the acre or to the hectare? How many kg would you use?
It depends on, if there was some clover there, we only want to top it up, we might go with a kilo. And then if there was no clover, we could use up to 2, and it can kind of vary between that then, as to how it depends how much clover is in a paddock already. Most of the time, most of our clover actually we put out this how would you say it? This is taken with a word of warning. I suppose that's the way you say it. Or we put a lot of it out through the dribble bar with the slurry tanker.
Oh, okay. I've heard that can be very hit and miss.
Yeah, if it depends. You don't put out slurry with. You put out dirty water with, because then it goes straight to the ground and the slurry is not going to cake on it.
Okay.
So we've actually established most of our clover on the farm that way through the slurry tanker.
But do you don't put it straight into the slurry tank, do you? Do you put it into the dribble bar part, or what do you do with it?
No, you put into you put your pipe down in the tank, your suction pipe down in the tank, and before you connect it onto the tanker, you throw in whatever your desired amount of clover is per acre. It depends on what you're spreading per acre and everything that way, the size of your tanker and the whole heap of things. But yeah, like we've a 3,000 gallon tanker, so if we're spreading a kilo to the acre, we're putting out 1,500 kilos. That tank was 2 kilos of clover.
Okay.
So it's we just throw 2 kilos of clover down the spout. When the spout is obviously in the tank, and then just connect on the tanker, and that gets mixed in through it then as the load has been sucked up.
Right. I did, and look, an agricultural publication that shall remain nameless was talking about clover establishment, and said that if you don't plough the ground to establish the clover in the first place, you were at nothing. But I mean, that would add a considerable amount of cost for a lot of farmers out there. And you're saying that you've had fairly good success just doing the method that you said there.
We have, because I have to emphasize, you cannot put out thick slurry. You can't. You have to. It's what you pull out the bottom of the tank before you agitate. You know, that kind of way. It's dirty water, because what'll happen is that water will go straight to the ground. It'll bypass the plants more or less. It'll go straight to the ground, and it'll bring the clover with it, and it's onto the ground. The clover's going. And like, because of the dribble bar, then usually you're back in fairly quick grazing with the dribble bar towards the splash plate, like you're not contaminating much grass. And then because it's watery slurry, you are there's not as much contamination of grass from that either. So you're back in grazing it. And what we found, the same with multi-species, what we found, we haven't spread multi-species to the tanker, but it's the establishment, it's still the same method. But what we found is the cows actually going into that field after are walking in the seed and helping the seed soil contact.
And in terms of kind of grass yields afterwards, how are you finding the clover impacts? Does it help the grass, or how are you finding it?
It does. And you see on the farm at the moment now, I know grass growth is a bit iffy at the moment anyway, but there was one paddock that there was very little clover in, and it was one of the first ones that started to get that slight yellow tinge. It was one of the first ones towards where there's we've ones out the back we call the high clover swards. There's two paddocks in particular that are very high in clover, and they're not, there's no sign of distress on them whatsoever on them two.
For you, I'm thinking, because I remember visiting your farm in January, and you had cattle out at that stage. You know, it's a gorgeous farm, but it's very, very dry. Do you find that the clover helps with drought at all? Because that's, the roots are meant to help as well, because they go that bit deeper, I think, don't they?
I don't know is the honest answer.
What about the multi-species swords? Because they would kind of be more renowned for deeper roots and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, they definitely. I even see it last year at I think it was the end of June, beginning of July. It was a kind of a dry spell there, and it was definitely the multi-species. There were the one paddocks on the farm. The paddocks of the multi-species were definitely the ones that stayed going. They just it just didn't affect them nearly as bad as the grass. It didn't stay growing at the same rate, but it stayed growing a lot more than what the grass did, if you can understand. There were a lot better growth rates on the multi-species than it was in the grass paddocks.
In terms of grass growth, what kind of grass measurements do you usually get every year?
I think Joe did a hub last year. He walked it back from how much we were feeding, I think. Because we're grass measuring now this year. We're doing it every 2 weeks. So far, we do it every week now from when we get into May.
Jeannie, are you getting 20,000 steps in the pedometer every time you do a walk on your farm?
No, I have a lad coming in to do it first. There's a chap coming here, Steve, is coming in to do it. He does 3 farms. There's a lad, two farms next door, so we're gone real lazy altogether.
God almighty. He'll be able to do a marathon by the end of all that.
Yeah, well he knows what to do. I don't. So I claim anyway. So But no, we grew around last year, so we had virtually no fertilizer. We threw it very small in January, so for the stuff that was left over in the yard. The reason it went out because it was there. So it was virtually no fertilizer last year, and I think it was just over 12 tons dry matter we grew on the grazing platform. So,
and I guess though, since you've cut off the chemical fertilizer tap altogether, has it mattered?
has it mattered? I suppose because we changed the cow calving, the demand in the spring is not as high.
Okay.
Because it's not all fresh calf cows, if you know what I mean. Because it's autumn ones, the demand is not quite as high, I think. But has it mattered? I don't think it. We still have grass. Like, we have a good cover on the farm there at the moment.
Yeah.
We cover on the farm, and like we're only following with watery slurry.
Yeah. The
first round, and so we're in the second round now. But yeah, I suppose we are back a bit on grass, but we're still fine if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
We're okay for grass. Like the cows, they're still like there's no buffer feeding. We stopped buffer feeding about 2 weeks ago now, or a little more, say 3 weeks ago maybe. And they're only on 4 kilos in the power, like, and they're still on 27 liters ahead, and the fats and proteins are well up, like, so there's nothing. Yeah, I don't think there's no huge there wasn't this shock to the system. I suppose that's the way you say it, because we were a while reducing the fertilizer. I think it just gave the biology a chance to get going in the soil. That was we didn't just turn off the tap overnight, that kind of way.
I guess we've been talking a lot about clover, but you're very well known for your multi-species swards as well. And I did, believe it or not, I did do some research on this. Prepare to be impressed. So there was research by Trinity College Dublin, and look, for conventional farmers, if there are any listening out there, what is it now? For multi-species swards receiving 150 kilos per hectare per year of nitrogen, they outperformed perennial ryegrass receiving double the amount of fertilizer. And also it was shown that in intensively managed grasslands, increasing the species by up to 6 species helped to beat drought conditions. So that would tie in well with what you were saying. And I guess the scheme that we were talking about earlier, there's a red clover scheme, but also there's a multi-species sward scheme. So look, we talked about establishing clover, and you have your trick there for doing it with the slurry tank. What do you do for multi-species? Do you do the same thing, or do you do it at a different time of year, or how do you go about it?
It doesn't work through a slurry tank. so I found out.
Well, look, isn't it great that you were the guinea pig and you found that much out for us? It was very good of you.
Yes, it doesn't work anyway. But yeah, I suppose we've done multi-species kind of everywhere at this stage. The first one we put in was a overseed, so we just went in with the disc again, and we didn't put out a massive. It was a kind of a trial with DLF that we done to see could we establish it first.
Yeah.
And Thomas Maloney came up and we talked through what we're going to do. And I grazed the paddock very bare and went in and was kind of let down the disc maybe an inch in the ground, maybe not even quite an inch, and broadcast the seed out over, but it established really, really well. I grazed it after we sowed it. I grazed it for about 9 days after sowing it as well, just to knock the grass completely back. Now there wasn't a lot on it. Like, I was feeding the hay inside the gate to the cows that were on it, but it was just to knock back, to keep the grass knocked back. That was the very first one we done. So that was only an oversow. So we just put out the chicory, plantain, and clover, just to see what it established. We went across. Then we did 2 paddocks. We sprayed off 2 paddocks. This is pre-organic, just in case.
Just in case, yeah.
Sprayed off 2 paddocks, and we didn't plough. I went in and disc one of them twice, and on the second discing, I broadcast the seed.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other one, then I went in, and on the first discing, I broadcast the seed. And when I went across the field, when I turned around, I no more than knew where I was after driving over. I was after doing that light discing on it. There's no difference between them 2 paddocks today. There's no difference whatsoever. You wouldn't know one was only disc once, the other one was disc twice.
And what time of year did you do that at?
They were done in May. The 3 of them were actually done in May, I think. I think
And did you follow it with watery slurry again, or did you just keep it grazed tight, or what did you do?
they were followed. I after the first grazing. Sorry, I was trying to think. After the first grazing, they got watery slurry. Once it was up and established, like I think the one we oversowed, I think we were back in that about 6 weeks. I think it was only about 6 weeks later we were back in that field. It was fairly, or could have been even a bit less. Could have been 5 weeks, I think.
And how much you said you had a 3,000 gallon tank, or God, I'm 3,000 liter tank. But
Yeah,
how much to the acre were you spreading that watery slurry?
1,500 gallons of watery slurry. We'd be going with most of the time 1,500 gallons.
Okay. And your sowing rate for the multi-species, can you remember what that was?
For the oversown or the reseed?
Well,
Or both?
both, Kevin. You're telling me you don't have them off the top of your head, no?
I do, yeah. The chicken and plantain was 2 kilos of each, then a kilo red clover went into the overseeded one, and the full reseed was 14 kilos. Now we've done from 14 to 18 kilos of multi-species, just to see what way. It's to see with weed suppression. It does suppress more with the higher seeding rate. With the extra 4 kilos, I suppose it does a little bit, but whether it's worth it as regards the price of seed and everything, there's not a huge difference between it. There's not a huge difference. Yeah, it's 14 kilos went in with that anyway. That's with 14 kilos to the acre of the reseed.
No, that's very good. Final question, because you've been very good. I think gold star so far. But I always enjoy chatting to you because you're always thinking of things or planning things. And last time we were there, you were thinking about organic butter, and now I hear that you're selling eggs, or I've also heard about the milk vending machine. So are you considering anything kind of a bit different? Is there anything a bit different on the horizon for the farm?
Easy answer, no. There's not. If we could get the butter thing up and going, that was just, as I said to you before, if I could split myself in two, it'd be awful handy.
Yeah, you and every other farmer out there. Yeah.
Yeah. The what you call, yeah, I'd love to, if we could get that going or even started. And I have, how would you say, I have people looking into things for me, because I want to start at home.
Yeah.
So it's the regulations regarding that, because it's a raw food source. So there's a bit of regulation there, but yeah, I just want to start at home. If we could get it's to start and see if there's a market now. Apparently there is, but what do you call it? Yeah, if we could get that up and going, I'd absolutely love to get that up and going if I could.
Yeah,
I'd love to get that up and going.
Okay, Kevin, I'll leave you in peace. Thank you very much. For everyone out there listening, you've been listening to the Organic Matters podcast brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. So if you want any more information, you can go to www.irishodganicassociation.ie, and also check out Kevin on Twitter or Instagram as well. He has some very interesting stuff out there. But until next time, thank you very much for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe.